Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of the I'm Telling God About This podcast. Today, it is just me, Anderson, and Tim. We're going to be talking about some of the misuse of scripture in the current time. Right now, we're dealing with holidays. You can see it's just us two. There's a lot going on during the holidays. We all have young families, and we have lots of obligations. So we probably won't be coming out with a lot of episodes. This might be the last one for the year, but we will start it up strong beginning of next year and be hitting the ground running. A lot of really cool stuff planned out next year. So, it's post
feel like
Thanksgiving.
It's going to be way more efficient to radicalize you in a one-on-one situation. I'm really excited for this.
It's so funny. Like, it's funny. Most people think it's like, well, how did I get radicalized? How did I get what you think is radicalization? And the reality is most people they actually spell out their beliefs in words or in terms or in guardrails to say, yeah, I actually believe this and not this. So oftentimes we believe certain things about our worldview, and then we don't really think them through about the implications that they might have. And so the areas where we're kind of like, it's not that big of a deal. I'm kind of soft on that particular area. You realize, no, that's kind of a big deal to kind of be soft on because that leads to X, Y, Z. It's just thinking through it. So I wouldn't call it radicalization rather than refining.
Refining. Okay.
Oh my goodness. How was Thanksgiving?
It was really good. Yeah, I love me the big holidays. Were you part of that group chat where somebody posted their sanitized corporate hey, go give a thank you card to your coworker for
I didn't see that.
And yeah, I was laughing at it because I was like, hey, who are we supposed to be thanking at Thanksgiving? Corporate.
Oh, I saw that. Yeah, I saw your comment on that.
Who are we thanking? Who are we thanking?
Right, exactly. And that's the crazy thing. Like, that's the story of Thanksgiving. It baffles my mind when people are like, oh yeah, it was such a racist, horrible thing, and they bring up Columbus and all this. I'm like, that had nothing to do with Thanksgiving. Like the pilgrims that came over in 1621 or whatever it was, and they came over and they were half of them were living on the ship during that harsh winter, right, and the other half were trying to survive on the land. And the issues that everybody was running into is like they were inhabiting a area where a tribe had literally died because of either starvation or genocide from another tribe, or
harsh weather.
It was a harsh environment. And so because they were about to die, and these Native Americans came and helped them to survive, taught them a few things about corn.
Stop. Are you repeating the poor pilgrims helped by Native Americans fiction of Thanksgiving?
No. I'm saying that was one of the things that they were being thankful of, is that they were able to survive and not, in that environment, they were able to survive the harshness of the winter with the help of some of the natives as well. I mean, it wasn't fully because of the natives, but I'm saying it was like they were able to be accepted, not be genocided out of, their mind.
I'm sorry. I didn't know that the whole poor struggling pilgrims being helped to survive by the Indians as a
that was a reason with why they invited the Indians to have dinner, right? That's the only reason that they invited him over. Why would
Rush
they invite
Limbaugh
him over?
Would be very disappointed in you.
No, that's a part of his book. The Rush Limbaugh and the First Pilgrims. He writes about that, doesn't he? I don't know. What am I missing? Okay. Here's where the radicalization begins. Go ahead. Tell me. Teach me. What am I missing here?
So you had the pilgrims basically practicing a very communal standard of living, where everybody was supposed to be working collectively, and then everybody would be, because the idea was, well, we're in a small tight-knit community, therefore we need to share amongst ourselves so that we will all survive and have enough. And that went really poorly because communism just doesn't actually work. Yeah, and you'd think in a situation like that it actually could, because you would assume there would be strong enough social bonds to force there to be effortfulness
Mm-hmm.
with respect to production, regardless. Like, you'd think there would be social stigma to be like, to like not working that hard or whatever. But
Mm-hmm.
even then, apparently not so much. And so they reorganized the uh, economic structure of their community such that you had the responsibility of your area and you got to keep the proceeds of that and so on.
Right.
And that ownership of it produced a great deal of bounty. And so
Mm-hmm.
the true story of Thanksgiving is not a bunch of, you know,
Oh no, no,
roughed
no.
up,
They,
wind-blown pilgrims needing the benevolent, the noble
oh
savage Native
no.
Americans to come and, I mean, that's basically the
Right.
story that you just.
But I said that there was some communication and there was some help that in trade and in not being killed off, like surviving. They were thankful to God more than anything else. They weren't thankful to the natives. They were thankful to God for
Yeah, but I
surviving.
mean the idea of like the Native Americans playing this pivotal role in the,
Oh no,
like,
not a pivotal role, but I mean it was a reason they played a role, and that was why that they were asked to the table
I'm
for
gonna get Laura down
Thanksgiving.
here. She has ancestors
Dude,
traced
we
to the
need to.
Mayflower, and she's gonna have some words
Well,
with you.
I need to look into it a little bit more because I thought that there was some what was it what was the what's a I don't what is the name of the guy, the native that actually spoke English, that was a
Oh,
godsend for them?
Squanto.
Squanto. Yeah, that he was able to initiate trade and alliances between those tribes so that they weren't, killed off. Because like
Yeah, I'm
that
not
was
saying
the
Native
norm.
Americans didn't exist. I'm talking about specifically like Thanksgiving, because there is a it's like one of your classic myths, your liberal myths
Hmm.
related to the founding of America that just isn't true. The idea that first of all, you have the trope of the noble savage Native
Right.
Americans, living at
Oh,
peace
the
with
people
nature,
that
being
didn't
able to
have the
live
wheel and were
competently off the
genociding women and children. Yes.
right, right. And then you have these ill-prepared dummy colonists not knowing what they were getting themselves into, and repaying the benevolence of the Indians who
No.
helped to help
Yeah,
them
yeah.
survive with plague and violence and all of this stuff.
Oh, I think, yeah. I mean, I'm not saying that if it weren't for the natives that the pilgrims would not have survived. I'm not saying that. They would have survived regardless, but I'm saying that there was more opportunities for trade and communication because of this opportunity. They come to this foreign land for a new beginning, and God provides this unique situation where Squanto is able to speak their language and also communicate to the people around them, right? To open up
Sure.
lanes of trade and all that stuff. It's like, wow. Because they thought this, like, man, this was God working in action to help us survive, and this is was a almost like a sign for them to, like, God wants us in this country. And so yeah, anyway, I thought that was really cool. But yeah, dude, maybe we should do like a deeper dive and go over, like, here's the myths, because I agree there was
We should
the
do a
idea
myths of
of
Thanksgiving.
the noble savage didn't exist, and the idea that that the white Westerners, Europeans came and genocided the natives, when it's like, look, germs don't mix when they've never touched each other ever. Like,
Well,
yeah, you're gonna
and a
have
lot of people forget that,
thousands,
like,
hundreds and thousands of people die because of germs.
oh yeah. Well, I mean, what was it? I think something like a third of the population
Yeah.
of Europe died to the Black Plague, right? And that was that same process going in reverse. That was plague from
Hmm.
the East Asia, coming in
Hmm.
on trade ships and just ravaging over the course of
Right.
like
So that's the
50,
same thing
100
happened
years. Yeah,
when trades opened up in the East. You started to
yeah,
see, oh, everybody just died. And the same thing when the West came over to the new world.
yeah.
Same thing happened. Yeah.
But the Native
Interesting. Cool.
Americans were so immunologically naive, like,
Right. Well,
just
they
they're
didn't really have
yeah,
to. Yeah, they were so isolated from the rest of the, which is fascinating to be fair. Like, I mean, you have such a huge area of land, and you didn't have nearly enough people to actually fill it, and it was just, of course, there didn't, and they didn't have these large cities. Everything was mobile. Everybody
yeah,
was moving around, and so like and real no agriculture to speak of. Like, they would grow corn maybe, but like there was no dedicated like planting things because they were never staying in the same place for long enough for a whole season. They literally,
Yeah.
like, what was it, the Comanche Indians in Texas, they literally just hunted the buffalo to extinction and didn't even think twice
Yeah.
about it. You're like, what are you doing? There's a reason
Well,
why there's
yeah.
hunting seasons.
Well, not only
There's
that,
no more food now.
but they would actually herd them off of cliffs because that was like the easiest way to kill them.
Yeah,
Because a buffalo is big game. That's not a straightforward thing to
dude.
kill, but it was
Yeah,
easiest to just herd them off of a cliff. But then you've basically just killed an entire herd of it, and you're going to harvest like a tiny portion of that before the rest of it all, spoils. Just
yeah.
like the most foolish way to handle that kind of thing. And then yeah, the
Man.
best evidence you have of anything approaching civilization is some of the like mound structures, which
Mhm.
were not like it's
Weren't they
not
more
like they like
burial
there may
sites?
have been they could have been burial sites. A lot of them are, if you read Graham Hancock, he wrote a book called America Before. He's been on Joe Rogan. He's
Oh,
talked about
okay.
this. And he goes through, he spent a lot of time talking about monolithic sites elsewhere in the world, but you do actually find some of a lot less sophistication in North America where you have mound sites where, I mean, it's pretty simple. You basically just scoop up a bunch of dirt, but
Right.
they also endure pretty well unless you have like a lot of erosion for some reason, because like a hill isn't a sophisticated structure, but it sticks around for a while. And so
Right.
it took them a while to discover a lot of them because you have to be able to differentiate between an artificial mound that was created and one that is, oh, that's just a hill, you know?
Right.
So
I think was Grant I think he do that documentary on Netflix where, and it was talking about some of these mounds were like the ancient pyramids of the in
yes.
America, which are essentially just ziggurats, but they're essentially and then I think there was the writings of Abraham Lincoln or people in that time that said that those were the burial sites of giants. That they like, there's some
Ooh.
interesting stuff there, dude. There's a lot of
Josh
really
Hughes is
interesting.
just gonna like pop
I
in
know.
here because he
He's
hears
like, "Hey
us.
guys, what's up? What I miss?"
Well, I mean, that's right.
Anyway, let's kind of move on. All right. So one of the things that I've been seeing, with the culture today, because you have ICE raids that are going through and they're grabbing illegal immigrants and sending them back home. There's also this, what is it? The other day, Trump, was it yesterday or day before yesterday? Trump just went just whole on savage on Somali immigrants
Oh
in
yeah.
Minnesota. And so like there's a lot of these this idea that like if you're an illegal immigrant here or just an immigrant in general that hates America, get out. We don't want you here. This is not some place that is a place where you can go to retire and not contribute or something like that, or
Yeah, well,
take
because
money and
you're
then
also talking
send it
about
back
immigrants
home or
who are,
something.
yeah, immigrants who are here like legally and in the
Hmm.
bureaucratic sense, but then are, committing various forms of fraud, or even just be like, if you're an immigrant who's here legally, but you are relying on the welfare state for your survival, it's like, well, w- why am I on the hook to support
Hmm.
this random person who decided to come to my country? Like, what? Why is
Hmm.
that?
Yeah, I think that that's the kind of the, what is it, the weapon against every, of it all is you have people that are posting and saying, quoting scripture, for instance. And so like, for instance, I have an example here, and this is just one of many that I have seen.
Okay.
All right. All right. So this, for instance, they'll say Christians who support Trump and are anti-immigration. Let me hit you with a Bible quote real quick. let me hit you with a Bible quote real quick, Tim. When a foreigner resides among you in your land, do not mistreat them. The foreigner resides among you must be treated as your native born. Love them as yourself. For you were foreigners in Egypt. Okay, so what I guess that they're saying here is that because the Bible is saying don't mistreat an immigrant. You're supposed to treat them with dignity like you would a native born person. They're translating to say, well, if they're here, they're an immigrant and they're foreign, even if they're here illegally, you need to treat them just like a modern day citizen. The only problem with that is this word for immigrant here, like what you look at Leviticus 19:33 in Blue Letter Bible, stranger. Yeah, there we go, stranger. So this stranger or the sojourner, right, among you, it's a temporary inhabitant, a newcomer, right? So like a foreigner of Israel. These are not the people that are coming and staying and living amongst them. Furthermore, here's the thing: there's other aspects of, the way that Israel treated its own people and held its illegal or its aliens or its foreigners in the land. It wasn't saying, well, you can come here and you can do whatever you want. You can worship your own gods. You can do all these things. Like in, Leviticus 17, God's talking, laying out the sacrificial system. And one of the things that he says that it says in verse 8 and in chapter 17 says, and you shall say to them, anyone of the house of Israel or the stranger who sojourns among you, who offers a burnt offering or sacrifice and does not bring it to the entrance of the tent meeting and offer it to the Lord, that man shall be cut off from his people. So meaning, like, if you want to worship in your own way, it doesn't matter if you're a citizen or if you're an immigrant, you're going to be cut off from the people. There is an expectation of behavior if you're going to be part of the community here. Furthermore, he goes into talking about drinking of blood. Like if you eat flesh and you drink the blood of a sacrifice, then you're going to be cut off regardless, again, if you're a sojourner or an immigrant or a native born. So one of the things that is frustrating with this is when people online are just pounding these verses, and there's all throughout the Old Testament and even some in the New Testament about foreigners and sojourners and how we are to treat them. Every single person has the dignity of being an image bearer, but not everyone is given the right to participate in the community. And that's the problem.
Or be wherever they want, or be wherever they
Right.
want in the first place. Like the idea that if you want to accuse America on that basis, like first, if you're going to bring up scripture, because there's a certain like arrogance there where it's like, if I'm going to criticize a Mormon, right, for what I see as the holes, the obvious, holes in their theology, their framework or whatever, even then, I'm not going to be naive enough to imagine that they've never thought of it before. Like, I understand that they have
Right.
answers for these things. I think they're weak, but for the most part, you're not going to go up to a Mormon and be like, well, what about, blah, 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 blah. Like, what
Right.
about the polygamy and what about the racism and where did the plates go? Like I don't think they have satisfying answers, but this isn't like a surprise. This is not a mic
Right.
drop. Like, well, they're going to be like, oh, well, this changes everything, and so first of all, it's like, I understand that you could take out, you can choose verses out of context, but here's the thing. If you want the right to bring scripture to the table in an argument, until you can tell me that this is the inerrant authoritative word of God, you don't get to have an opinion that has any sway with me.
That's
That's
right.
the litmus
I mean,
test for you
100%.
being able to make a biblical argument.
Well, and then, because I get that in the sense, well, you believe it, so I'm just going to quote it to you. And it's like, okay, well, if you can give it some authorities to say that it is true, because they're not even saying that they believe it. They're just putting,
No,
well, you
I wouldn't
believe it,
even
so
get that
therefore you have to
far.
follow it.
Because here's the thing.
Well, I'm saying
if
that
they're choosing to misinterpret what you believe in order to
correct.
make a point to you, this is a no-win scenario for you. Because what they're saying is, I've decided what I think your beliefs mean. You could make an argument against that, but I've already decided what your beliefs mean. So any argument you make isn't
Correct.
going to affect me. My position is unmoved. And so they are arguing against you on the basis of a platform that they don't share. There is no point in having any theological discussion with that person who doesn't actually share the foundation. Like you should just stop altogether, because they don't have room to care about the theological nuance that you're correctly pointing out. That like, well, that doesn't mean this, whatever. It's like, well, I think it does, so I think you're a hypocrite. It's like, well, you were welcome to think that I was a hypocrite before, but you don't have any space to make those judgments because you actually don't know what you're talking about.
That's the key. They don't know what they're talking about. They're not looking at the context. They're not looking at the greater story. They're not looking at the greater picture, right? At least when Christians engage in Islam apologetics or polemics, and they go into the Quran, they're not affirming that it's real, but they are looking at the context. They're looking at the way that it is being followed by a majority of Muslims around the world, and they're saying, hey, when it says strike down the non-believer anywhere you find them, like, this is something that was taken seriously. It's different because we're engaging in the text. Stuff like this, it's this flippantly thrown out, cherry picked, oh, we found a scripture that says, hey, treat the foreigner with dignity and respect the way that you would treat a native born, because you were foreigners at one point too. And then somehow taking that and transporting it into the context of, you can't support Trump's ICE raids because we need to treat illegal immigrants. Like, I'm sorry, that's a huge jump. That's we're utilizing scripture as a bludgeoning tool that isn't even in the right context. Like, it's not, you're not even understanding it, which is so disrespectful for to begin with. And two, you're right, it's a lose situation. It's like you can't even engage with them at that point. It's just not a good faith argument
absolutely
from the beginning.
You should say LOL and move on, because
That's right.
these are not serious people.
Right.
They're not. Now, here's the thing: if you're a Christian and you don't understand why that's a bad argument, then you should know. Then you should, if you see that and you think, oh gosh, that makes me feel really bad. Am I being, sinful? Then you should absolutely find ways you need to reconcile your own beliefs such that you can be obedient in a way that is in accordance with your own conscience and your beliefs as guided by the Bible. But that's different than actually engaging with a person who is intentionally only engaging in bad faith, because the goal isn't to come to a consensus about what right is or to guide you into truth. The goal is to just manipulate your behavior by emotionally blackmailing you on a basis that they don't even believe in.
And emotionally blackmailing you on something that they don't necessarily believe in the sense, and you could use that in the way, this whole argument about illegal immigration. If you were to sit down people that are opposed to these ICE raids, you would ask them, do you think that people that live here illegally should vote? I would say that the majority of reasonable thinking people, which is kind of few and far between these days, would say no. I think that why would you have an election if anybody can vote? And shoot, we just generate votes and see where the chips
how
lay.
Far down the list I have to get of people who shouldn't vote before.
What do I mean? We move current laws as they stand, but like generally a reasonable person would say, yeah, I think that there should be rules around voting. Like, yeah. So they don't even believe that you should treat an illegal immigrant the same as you should treat a native-born person in the first place.
Oh, I think they're
trying to shame you into something they don't even believe themselves.
Yeah. I know. I think they do. I think the ideologues that will make those kinds of arguments would say,
I'm talking about the reasonable
there should be
people.
no such thing as. Here's the thing: there's almost not that much point in talking about the people who don't agree with you but are persuadable. They almost don't exist anymore. And let me give you an example, because here in Virginia we just had the election where the guy who was, and just to be clear, these facts weren't disputed, he was fantasizing about killing a political opponent's children so that they would die in their parents' arms, and that death would cause that person to change their political beliefs. Okay? If there were reasonable people in the middle who, believed things like, well, you shouldn't, if part of your worldview involves believing that people's children dying in their arms is an effective way to achieve your political goals, if there were reasonable people, they would not have voted for that person. Okay. And so
that's fair.
When I say it used to be that each political side understood that there was a certain need to moderate your political tone, specifically so as not to scare off that slice of persuadable people in the middle. Because there's always been people on the far wings who would have said, yeah, absolutely, kill my political opponents. They're the worst people. I mean, we went through that. We had a literal civil war where everybody agreed that that was the best way to resolve our
Right.
differences, and then that happened, okay? And so the reason you're seeing this deterioration in tone is because there's actually no purpose served by it anymore, because it seems increasingly like everybody has pretty much picked a side. And
Mm.
now it's just a matter of holding to your beliefs, not being bullied out of them if you do
Right.
indeed believe that you are on the right track, and preventing others from being emotionally bullied, because there are definitely people who I think are emotionally bullied but don't actually agree with the person they're being emotionally bullied by. There's a lot of, especially if you're talking about people whose social cultural experience is really limited. So for instance, if you live in a wealthy enclave of the West Coast, you don't necessarily see the kind of environment that's created in a city like Charlotte, where a guy who's got a rap sheet way longer than anybody who's walking free
Right.
should have randomly stabs a person in cold blood, and then isn't even immediately assumed to like be held, like is sent for evaluation, for psychological evaluation, to decide if he can even
Well,
stand
and the
trial.
judge that released him 19 times or whatever isn't prosecuted and hung. Like that's just the
Yeah.
common like sense action. Like, this is ridiculous, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
And that's
I
to
get
say
that.
nothing of Charlie Kirk, which is a more extreme example of like, well,
Right.
look, I watched this guy get assassinated, and then I watched a tremendous number of you celebrate it. Okay? That's
Yeah.
not, these aren't people you debate with. And I don't
Right.
say that, I don't say that lightly. It's just like, what can you even say?
Sure.
What shared foundation do you have at that point?
Hmm. And that's why I think that it's interesting, and I think it's important for Christians to understand that, first of all, if you're a Christian, you need to allow your theology to affect your politics, because that's exactly what the Bible essentially calls for. You're not supposed to obey, man, when it's in conflict with obeying God. That's what Peter and
Right.
John had to do in the book of Acts when they actually talked to the political powers, the Sanhedrin. Like, are we not supposed to preach God, preach Jesus as God? Should we obey you, or should we obey God? And so, in the same
Right.
sense, right, it is not a violation of the golden rule of do unto others as you would have them do unto you, or of the second greatest commandment is love, is to love your neighbor as yourself. It is not a violation or outside of good theology to say, if you are here doing damage or here illegally breaking a law or taking advantage of the laws of this country that is established, there are consequences, and we should see you first. Yes, you have dignity as a person, as a human being made in the image of God. You have dignity. And it's like, why? First of all, it grieves me that I have to, for some of you, I have to actually say that. Like, that is a given, right? Like, we're not
Right.
debating that. But to hold people accountable for their actions, I don't care if they were in desperation or if they, whatever. If they came here illegally and they didn't go through the process, should be a consequence for that, because you're choosing somebody that breaks the law over somebody that isn't breaking the law. And a majority, like I would say, almost 100% of the people that came here legally, that immigrated legally, could hate illegal immigration, because it's one, it's not fair, and then two, it affects the most marginalized or poorest communities in America when you do have, illegal immigrants come in, because they're the ones that take jobs from the poorest communities, because
Well, it's
they'll
not
work
just
for
jobs.
less and
It's
off
also
of the
housing.
record.
It's also food.
Right.
You really can't talk about any kind of inflation when you have arguably 10 to 20 million people who shouldn't be here.
Right.
You're talking about, like,
That's a
you think
huge.
that's
I
a
mean, think
huge
about it.
number.
It's a huge amount, and like the amount of construction sites that they're like, you see online, and people posting on X or on YouTube, and they're like, "Oh, it's empty. Or I'm the only person
Yeah,
here
I don't know
today,
how
and
much
how are these things
credibility I
ever be
assign
built?"
to.
And
Yeah.
I'm just like, okay, like, well, then hire Americans. They're there. It's not like they're not
Right.
there.
Well,
Hire
because think
Americans
about, yeah,
and don't pay them under the table like you've been using the slave labor that everybody wants to these corporate. I mean, it's not just
right.
it's a lot of these businesses that are like, well, how am I supposed to survive? Well, you don't spend more than your means by hiring basically modern day slaves to work for nothing that live in
Right.
one house with
And
16 families.
if that's your argument, if your argument is specifically with housing, that, oh, well, we need to keep the price of building homes down, and in order to do that, we need to bring in a bunch of workers to pay more cheaply. What you're basically just implementing roundabout price controls on homes, and you're saying that I'm trying to artificially suppress the cost of this thing compared to other things. But as it turns out, it seems like that's more than offset by the amount of additional housing demand that you're
Hmm.
creating. So
Oh yeah.
I don't know that
Well,
that's it's not, it's a disingenuous economic argument because it doesn't hold up to any scrutiny. And so I think the people that are making them, um, but here's the other part of it. I would accept. I want a cohesive, uh, a strong, high trust society for myself, my family, my church, my community more broadly. I want that level of civilizational order and the fruits that come from that, from being able to deal with one another with confidence, to know that there is a genuine amount of, like, criminal accountability when something doesn't go the way it should. And I would sacrifice a lot. I would sacrifice a lot economically to have that. So if you're making economic arguments about why immigration is positive, understand that, at least with me, you're arguing at a tier below a whole other set of priorities that are much more important.
yeah, and I would say that those higher priorities are things that are a result of following good biblical theology and good biblical ethics. And when you hold a community to that standard, I think it's a lot of times, man, it's taking the easy way, the easy route, and what you do is you sacrifice the good. You sacrifice the sacred because it's more convenient. It's easier to just have illegal immigrants, work on our farms because we don't have to pay them as much, and then we can supply even more to everybody. Um, I mean, you're making these arguments, but it's essentially it's ignoring the fact that you're taking advantage of these poor, people that are literally
I
living
actually
in,
don't
multiple.
I actually don't agree with you there. I don't,
Okay.
and I don't think that's a good argument. Here's why. If it wasn't better for them, for the worker coming in illegally to do, like, whatever job, if it wasn't better for them from where they came from, they wouldn't be here. Okay, so at least in their estimation, which arguably is the one that matters, they're not being
Okay. I
taken
mean,
advantage of. They're being taken advantage of compared to an American worker, but that's not their baseline. Their baseline is getting murdered by a cartel back home if they
sure.
don't, pick the, I don't know what, the
Right, that's
poppies or
fair.
what, like, whatever drugs
That's
it is that
fair
they're,
in comparison to maybe what they're,
yeah.
the other
And so
opportunities that they
I
had
don't
where they
have to
came from.
sit there.
But
Yeah, I don't have to sit there and argue from the basis of the welfare of the immigrant, is my point. Like,
mhm.
I am allowed to prioritize my own people, my own countrymen, the people who are part of the historical collective of this country, whose culture, language, traditions meld easily with one another. I am allowed to preference their welfare within their own country, even if it does result in in depriving someone foreign of an opportunity in my country. That's allowed. That's allowed. I am allowed in the same way to create opportunities or give things to my own children when other children are much worse off as a baseline. I don't, when I'm buying Christmas presents for my children, I don't feel a pang of guilt because, wow, boy, that's an expensive gift. And that one gift is multiples of probably the cost of gifts that other, no, I give it to them
Right.
because they're my children and they deserve I'm not deserve in the sense that they have a right to demand it, but
Well,
they,
they have
as
the
my
inheritance of it.
children,
Yeah.
are the beneficiaries. They're the
Hmm.
primary intended beneficiaries of the blessings that I am capable of giving them. And the Bible is filled with uh, with father, son, child, adoption language.
Hmm.
You cannot
Hmm.
pretend like preference for one's own is not just running
Well,
through
and
the
this was
entire
the controversy that JD Vance ran into in that interview earlier either it was this year or yeah, I believe it was this year, where he was talking about the order of loves, right? You have your
Ordo
immediate
Amoris. Yeah.
family, your own
Yeah.
community, right? And so, yeah, that's 100% true. And I think that from that perspective, you're 100% right. I think the point that I'm making, yes, I guess from the perspective of the well-being, not necessarily the well-being of the immigrant, is what I was arguing. I was arguing more so the argument saying that we should allow illegal immigrants here to do the work that no American would do. Which first of all, that's not true. There are plenty of people that would work for higher wages, and it's just these people taking advantage from an ethical standpoint. I think are taking advantage of these illegal immigrants. But at the same point, I'm pointing out the stark contrast of irony that the same people that are against slavery are completely for slave labor as long as it's benefiting the rest of society, and that's their argument for that. So I think I agree
Yeah.
with
And
you
my
on
point
that.
is that even those arguments that the pro
Mhm.
or the anti-border side, I don't even know what really to call them, but is that those aren't their real arguments. Those aren't their real
It's fair.
arguments. These are people who their goal is basically the destruction of the traditional American society. And the
Yes.
easiest way to do it is by replacing, or like you don't even have to say replacing, but bringing in a huge proportion of people outside of that group to
Mhm.
permanently change the character so that what was the cohesive center point of culture and society can no longer sustain itself. That's the actual goal. I don't know any other way that you could look at what happened with the demographic replacement in Minnesota with like the Somalis there
Right.
to the like I don't you can't look at that and say, well, are you familiar with the axiom, the purpose of a system is what it does?
Oh, no, I'm not familiar
Yeah.
with that.
So the idea is if you want to understand what the design, the goal of a system is, you can't look at what it was intended to do. You have to look at what it actually accomplishes. And so you can say whatever you want about the intent that exists in the mind of the designer or the builder or whoever conceived it or what they want to happen. But when that bears no relationship to what's actually happening and the actual result in this case is the demographic replacement, you have to say like, well, arguably that is the purpose of the system that you have created in the sense that
Mm.
that is what it does effectively.
And that's a good point because and it kind of goes back to what you're saying is as a nation, we should not have any apology prioritizing our own people, our own citizens, our own ideology. And I don't care how popularized the idea is today that, oh, well, we're stronger because of our diversity, is not like that. That's just because somebody has a different color of skin is not diversity, right? Challenging ideas is diversity, but also there is unity around a basic fundamental worldview of this is good, this is right or wrong. You don't see anywhere in the Bible where there is an advocation for a usurping of the laws, the Levitical system, of what God had said. Hey, this is how you are to live. This is how you are to set yourself apart from the rest of the world. There is no laxing where it's been God says, okay, well that was there, and now you can worship other gods. Well, that was the very thing that put them into exile. And then furthermore, here's the interesting thing: when they went into exile, God said, go and do things that are good for Babylon, because as they're good for Babylon, they'll be good for you. So
Yeah.
there is this mindset. They didn't go, the people that were loyal to Yahweh didn't go into Babylon and, worship other gods. That's where you had Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, right, getting burnt.
Mhm.
And then, given a position of like respect, like, wow, the God of Israel is real. Or
I
Daniel,
mean, if you don't
who
burn up in
served,
the hottest fire, I feel
or
like you get a little
Daniel
bit
in the
of,
lion's
yeah.
den, things like that. So like there's different proofs there, but there was a
It's
directive to say,
it's
hey,
kind of
do things that
remark.
are beneficial to the country, because then it'll benefit you. In that same sense, that's not what's happening when people are coming to the United States. They're not doing things that are beneficial to the country. They're doing things that are actually taking advantage of the
Yeah.
country. And that's the thing I think that President Trump was really hammering on with the Somalians, is he's saying, like, you got 80%, what was it, the number 80% taking government subsidies and,
Yeah.
handouts, and not contributing to the overall and I think there
Well,
was also a study that said, like, even it's states, not just people groups, it's states that are trying to take advantage of federal handouts as well.
let me give you an example. Like, I of just the practical importance of a high trust society where, for the most part, people who are participating in it are doing so with integrity rather than trying to take whatever they can get away with. I bought an appliance that qualified for a like rebate from my power company
Mhm.
recently. Okay. And so I'm going through the process. They have like a little, website where you do all this stuff. And they're like, you upload your proof of purchase, um, which is a digital document. I ordered the thing online and they, process it for 2 weeks and then they like just send you a check in the mail. And like, of course, I thought like, wow, so pretty much anybody could just essentially mock up a,
Proof
proof
of
of
purchase,
purchase.
yeah.
Or if you really wanted to go through the motions, like buy it, then return it or something, and your proof of purchase would, technically be real. I'm not advocating
Right.
anyone do this. Like my integrity is worth more than
Giving
the
me
the
ideas, Tim.
cost of a. But my point is just that you have cultures who don't view it that way. They view it
Right.
as, hey, you would be stupid not to scam everything you can. In fact, not only would you be stupid, if you have an opportunity to take and scam, you're just depriving your own family of the resources that they could have gotten had you actually followed through with that scam that you had the opportunity to do. That is literally the mindset of many third world cultures, and it's one of the reasons that they struggle to support any complex industry or economy, because those things are predicated on people acting in good faith, and once they
Right.
have made an agreement, actually holding up their end of the their end of the bargain the way the other party would want them to. And that may
That's
sound
such
a
a good
lot
point.
like treat others as they want to be treated, but if you can't get there,
Right.
then you don't have a compatible society. If people are not capable of operating on that assumption, you can't even law enforce your way through that mindset, because
Right.
like, what are you going to do? What level of accountability do you think can get through the scam whenever you can mindset? Like, sure, you
Right.
will punish the people who you occasionally catch, but that's not perfect. And then
That's
what
not
do you
going to
have to
set an
do?
example when that's ingrained into the
Well, and
the,
think
the
about how
cultural
much you have
understanding or
to
norm.
degrade the rest of culture. I mean, this is
Right.
basically the, supermarkets locking up the expensive stuff when you have to go get an associate. It's like, okay, sure, like you solved the problem in that one really narrow thing, but you degraded your society generally, in the sense that you're
Mhm.
now having to operate in an environment where it's just presumed that if it wasn't locked up, someone would steal it. Like, you're not solving the
Right.
problem, you're just working around the consequences. I don't.
That's a very interesting point, because reading a book by Nabil Qureshi called "Seeking Allah, Finding Jesus." Phenomenal book about a guy growing up in a very tight knit Islamic family, and then finding Jesus through conversations with his buddy David Wood. Um, in his book, he writes about this honor shame culture within these Islamic societies,
Yeah.
and there was a cousin or an uncle of his that committed insurance fraud and realized that he could get a lower monthly price by saying that he was married. And
Hmm.
this was something that was known within, the family, like he was doing. It's like not a big deal. Okay, you're getting a better
Yeah.
price by lying, saying that you're married and you're getting a better rate. And of course, the insurance companies can't say, "All right, upload your proof of marriage or something," or even then, it's like there's ways to be fraudulent about that. Anyway, so this uncle got into a car accident and was calling up the insurance company and said, "Hey, I need you to cover this. I was hit." And the insurance agent, probably through well training, said, "Was your wife with you in the car?" And he's like, "My wife? No, I'm not married. What are you talking about?" And so he was hit with insurance fraud. And here's the telling
Yeah.
part. The sad part wasn't that he did something illegal and committed an insurance fraud. The real sad part is that the entire community that was part of laughed at him, saying, "Oh, you weren't smart enough to hide that. Ha ha
Yeah.
ha. Joke's on you. You deserved what you get because you weren't
Right.
good enough at
Not
hiding
even
it."
taking the lesson to be, wow, we should be more honest. It was like, wow,
Right?
you're not a very good scammer. Like, that's the insult.
And like, what society other than Christian society says, "Hey, it's good to have integrity in situations like that because it is something that honors God and reflecting the character of God." And you could say, well, it's secular humanism, and we've realized that this is something that helps and flourishes community. In what way? In a secular humanist mindset and worldview, shoot, that's like, who's it hurting? Like,
Right.
I'm getting a better rate. I'm saving a couple of dollars because, and then furthermore into, other, religious communities. There's no, other than
Yeah.
Christian communities and
And
Christian theology, like where
because
does that
we're
come from?
because we're coming out of a high trust society, and I say
Right.
coming out in the sense that we have the structures of one without the social cohesion or shared principles of one, that's creating a situation that's extremely ripe for scam and fraud and people being taken advantage of. In fact, I think it's probably one of the big drivers where you see a lot of fraud perpetrated against the elderly in particular. And not even like, we're not talking about like super
Yeah.
old people. We're talking about like 50s plus. And part of the reason that that's so successful, and sometimes you look at it, not to say that younger people don't fall victim to scams and things like that, but they grew up in a much higher trust society than they currently now inhabit. And so the idea that you can be called up on the phone by someone in, India or Thailand or wherever these various fraud, rings are based, because they're almost always foreign, specifically because there's no accountability really cross border. There's just no way to effectively investigate or, get recompense when there's damages that way. And so they hear these things and they think, oh, well, that must be like, the presumption is that it's true. Imagine the charmed life you live, the wonderful society you grew up in, where someone calls you on the phone that you don't know and you just kind of
You
believe that
trust
what
them.
they say is
Yeah.
true.
Yeah.
That is a wild level of trust. And I don't look at that person and think, oh, wow, you're an idiot. It's like, no, I know better because I didn't grow up in as much of the high trust, and through,
Right.
my
Well,
work
and
and other things, it's,
small things through like simply of like when I was a kid at a much younger age than my own children, I was going out with my older brother riding bikes 2-3 miles away from the house or more, riding around
yeah,
with groups of friends. And, the only rule I remember is we weren't allowed to go into anybody's house. Like, that was the only rule, which we may or may not have followed, depending if somebody had Mortal Kombat on their PlayStation 1. But we
so
generally did
specific.
not go into people's houses. Or Killer Instinct on the Super NES, which we didn't have one. So anyway, combo killer. Anyway, all right. So, but there was general rules, like, but we were able to
Yeah.
do that. There's
But
even
you don't
then
let
it
your
was a little bit
kids.
higher trust. But but right now, like I don't trust my own. Not necessarily I don't trust my own kids. I don't trust the people
Right.
around. And I live in a fairly nice community where people walk at night, but I see people driving in my residential neighborhood on their phone, going around a corner that they can't see who's there. And I'm like, I know that my kids are not necessarily going to be looking left or right every single time that they're in the street, and
Yeah.
that's the kind of thing that's like, I don't trust society to be like, hey, I'm in a residential area. Maybe I should just be careful, or, there to be
Yeah.
crazies around. The population was a lot less back then. I remember talking with people that I know that are a lot older, talking about their childhood growing up in the 1950s and 60s. Like, their neighborhood consisted of maybe 15 families in their entire neighborhood, and they all lived within a mile of each other. Like,
Right.
yeah, you have an inherent trust because there's just 19 of you. What else is going to happen? Like,
Yeah.
there's
Yeah,
nothing
and now you
around.
have a bunch of piranhas who are taking advantage of all of those trust structures because there's a
Mhm.
lot of people who just don't think to be critical of it. And they're starting to, but even now, most of the burden of looking at things critically has been taken up by uh, the commercial side of our society, basically preventing fraud because it's financially troublesome to deal with it. And so you create all these identity verification members, things in 2FA, and all of those things are necessary because a lot of people don't think to, protect their password or, like all these other things because there's just not that sense of security there. To like bring it back though to our like letting people use arguments against you on the basis of what you believe that they absolutely don't share. This is part of what I think Jesus was talking about when he talked about don't cast your pearls before swine. Okay?
Mm.
If someone is
Mhm.
willing to listen to you, absolutely be ready and be available to preach and teach and answer questions in good faith. But you don't continue engaging with people who are doing so in bad faith. It's not good for them. It's not good for you. And you're only stirring up hostility and agitation in them by continuing to converse on the basis of a fiction that
Mm.
doesn't have any real consequence in the first place because it's based on a lie. It's not going to matter to them. Hopefully, it doesn't make any difference to you because you know why you believe what you believe. So there is a biblical basis for that. You know what? Recognize, discern when people are behaving in bad faith, and you don't owe them answers about your beliefs when they are asking in bad faith. That's you, and you saw Jesus do that with the Pharisees repeatedly. They would ask questions that another person could have asked legitimately. Someone else could have said, Jesus, I try to follow the law and I take it really serious to keep the Sabbath by not working on it, and you're letting your disciples, work when that's
Right.
not allowed. Like someone could have
Right.
genuinely asked that question. The Pharisees did not genuinely ask that or virtually any questions. So,
Right.
you got to
Well, and
know,
they were trying
and
to
some
trap him in their own, like, for instance, um, should you pay taxes to Caesar? They're trying to trap him,
right,
in a question. Or there was they asked, what was that question where he's like, I'll answer your question, but you have to answer my question first. And they said, we don't know, because they realized they were outsmarted. And he says, well, I'm not going to answer your question if you're not going to answer mine. Like, that's,
right.
and it was like engaging them in a way that puts the borders and the barriers around, you know, the argument or the conversation to say, is this in good faith or is it not? So
Yeah, and
I
that
agree.
would
I
be
think
true right up to the point of someone saying like, "Oh, well, should abortion be legal in the case of, rape and incest?" Like, you don't actually have to answer that because that question's in bad faith. It's say, "Oh, do you think those are the only situations in which abortion should be legal?" "Oh, no." "Okay, then we don't
right.
we
We're
don't have
not
anything to
even
talk
like
about."
that's the thing, is bringing up the fringe cases, or what is it? The abortion. What is the statistic on that? It's like less than 1% of
Oh,
that
yeah.
actually being a thing. So I mean, like,
But that's the thing, even by going down that mental path that you just followed, you are giving that question
right.
more credit than it deserves. It's actually
Yeah.
important that you stop casting your pearls before swine and spending your energy. The only time that I think it makes sense to actually engage when there's that kind of bad faith, and even then it's borderline, is if there is someone else listening who might be affected by your
Well,
answer
and
positively.
and I think that's the beauty of public apologetics, I would say. or public debate like you have, for instance, in Hyde Park in the UK. It's the only place where people can't be arrested for free speech. Apparently, if you do anything online, you get arrested there. But in Hyde Park, it's this place of free speech. And there are so many Muslims that took over Hyde Park that were just basically just preaching against Christianity, preaching against everyone. And so nobody had like this free speech. So a bunch of Christians in the early, 90s through the 2000s started rising up and like, oh, we're going to do some polemics against Islam and we're going to start pushing back. And they weren't convincing the people that they were debating. And the people that they were debating in bad faith. Well, what about Rebecca? She was 3. No, okay, not even to dignify that with a response, but I have to, because this person, this Muslim over here, is actually seriously asking questions. And what they saw was a lot of Muslims in the community started converting to Christianity, and so the Muslims were like, "Whoop, okay, we gotta stop this debate with Christianity because it's converting our converts," And so like there is some value, I think, there in the sense that when there is an audience. However, if you're going on a conversation one-on-one, if somebody's already just even a family member, even somebody that's a close friend or a friend of, like, don't engage in bad faith arguments. It just stresses you out and stresses and gives that other person kind of this sense of, I don't know, entitlement over you. Oh, I'm going to make them do this,
right?
Play on their Christian values or their kind nature, and that's the most evil thing possible. Like, oh, I'm going to take advantage of you because I know that the Bible says that you're supposed to love me. That's like, what is it in Dresden Files when Nicodemus says, all right, I give up, and Antiochus is about to be sliced through his head. He's like, I give up. And you can't use the power of God in that way to slay when there is a genuine contrition, and you're like, oh,
right,
stop it. That's taking advantage of it. That's evil. So anyway, I don't know why that reference came to my mind, but
it's okay. I get it. I don't know what the Venn diagram is of like our audience, such as it is with Dresden Files readers. Yeah, but it's probably not 0.
Probably not 0. I mean, I know at least a couple people that I know read Dresden. So Michael Carpenter is one of the greatest fictional characters ever written.
Hey, can I rag on millennials for just a minute? Because
let's
twice,
go.
Because I feel like I rag on boomers a lot. Like a lot, which is funny because like my parents are great, so it's not like I have like a personal axe to grind there. It's but twice this week. Well, I sent you a picture of one of. I have found things on Facebook Marketplace that were like crazy good finds. I found a beautiful, like great condition, leather wingback, like real leather wingback chair. I won't tell you how much I paid, but it was like a fraction, a single-digit percentage of the actual value of this thing. If some and I ask why it's being sold, and she just goes, it just doesn't fit my vibe. I'm like, oh.
But was that millennial or was that a Gen Z? It sounds like a Gen Z statement.
I think it was it was actually an older millennial. I was surprised too.
Okay,
the vibe language.
That adopted.
Yeah. And but I come to find out it's actually like a recently deceased elderly relative that this belonged to, and she didn't want to keep it, so she just basically hawked it for nothing.
What?
And I know, and so
trampling all over the sacred.
Right. And so then like this is good stuff that can be like solid. Like I know what I'm looking at with these things. And then I found a beautiful, there's a lot of garbage grandfather clocks if you look online or whatever that have been, neglected or whatever. I found one that was it was built in 1985 because that's what's on the plate, in basically perfect condition. I brought it home, and it was cheap enough that I didn't know if it worked, but it was cheap enough. I was like, if I'm wrong, I'll take that hit, right? Get it home, works. Clockwork, like it clearly needed some like lubrication on the interior because the oil that it was made with had probably long since dripped off or dried up. Mm-hmm. And again, like peanuts. And so 2 things. 1, if you are a millennial who doesn't appreciate those fine things of genuine quality, rethink your value structure for things, particularly if you have kids, because those like artifacts, those ones that last, those fixtures are gonna
Mhm.
matter. Hopefully they'll matter to them, unless you're this woman who's just hawking her, dead father's wingback.
Jeez.
But elevate your consciousness with respect to the items that you imbue with significance. But also, if people in your area are hawking really good stuff, get it. Like, get it and
Yeah.
save it. And like, this is what was it? Was it James Madison's wife who saved all of the paintings from the White House when the
Oh,
British
when the
were,
British burnt it down? Yeah.
yeah, burnt it down? Yeah. You have a generational calling to do that. There's so
To
much good stuff
preserve.
there that's
Mhm.
going to end up in a landfill if you don't save it. And it's really cheap because they don't know what they have.
And you'll come into the age where you'll start to appreciate it. Like I think we were talking about earlier when it came to like the specialness of the dining arrangements of pulling out the silver and the china.
Yeah.
Like when we were kids, and you'd have the family Thanksgiving or something, and the china would be set with
Mm-hmm.
the actual cloth napkin with a ring around the napkin to hold together, like something that was
Yeah.
really nice, and candles and stuff.
Yeah.
And you're like, as a kid, you didn't really appreciate that, man. But coming up on 40, I'm just like, man, that's some high
Yeah.
class
Well, you didn't
stuff. That's
consciously
kind of
appreciate it,
classy.
but you knew that those were indications that what you were going through was special, you know?
Yes.
And so, well, that's another example. This was last year, but it like popped up on eBay and I just bought it immediately because this woman was selling a pristine set of sterling silver. And I checked. Okay. I know what to look for with these things. She was selling it for its melt value. And just so you understand what that means is the melt value, if you take anything you own that's silver, anything you find that's silver, that's actual sterling silver, the melt value is what you can walk into basically any pawn shop anywhere. And that is the value that they will
Right.
100% give you for it because that is its intrinsic numismatic value. And so something that's crafted, like sterling silver flatware or other things that are sterling silver, like, jewelry or whatever, generally go for, you know, depending on demand, 25 to 100% above that value. And if you want to buy those things new, that you'll be paying to that like 100. Like if you go get a
Premium.
new
Yep.
set of sterling silver flatware, and she I didn't even ask, but in like the description of the listing, she's like been in the family for like decades, some super long time, and just like, oh, so the price of silver went up a little bit, and you decided to hawk it for like a few grand, like, God,
Jeez.
I know,
I mean, it just hurts my heart. You
I
think
know,
about like the kind of like, think about, old man Jones or whatever it was at the beginning of their family, saved up and came from nothing and pushed the till to do the farm, and then saved up enough to find this, this sterling silver set that he's like, I'm going to pass this down generation to generation.
yeah,
And eventually it's going to end up with this dude named Tim. Like,
yep,
I mean, like, I can't imagine like the work of, and well, you know what? And here's a way to bring it full circle, right? That same sacredness and specialness that the founding fathers of this country built, that put their blood, sweat, and fortunes into, we are giving it away to some dude named Tim that came here from Venezuela illegally.
way to
And
close the
scene.
loop. Yeah.
Anyway, all right. This has been another episode of the I'm Telling God About This podcast. We're going to take a break for the holidays, but we will see you again next year. We'll probably
The
be putting out some
holidays,
shorts.
you stupid liberal. Which holiday? What are we celebrating?
Okay, Christmas and New Year's. I'm going to say one word instead of two. I'm a conservationalist. All right. I'll see you guys later. Bye.